Okay, you got the tools, you got the certifications, but if you don't understand cloud hierarchy, you're one mistake away from a catastrophic breach. In Cloud Wars, winning isn't about its features, it's about control. Today, I'm breaking down the structure of the big three: AWS, Azure, and GCP. Knowing the difference between securing your company and letting a single error compromise everything. They all do the same thing, but they all call it something different. I'm holding down Jay, former Air Force veteran, now transitioned to senior SOC analyst. I'ma holla at y'all after this theme song. Peace. All right, y'all, welcome back. The first one we're gonna start with is AWS Cloud Hierarchy Structure. Think of it as a tree. The way they grant users access and all the groups and etc., they call it IAM, aka Identity Access Management. This is the bread and butter. Actually, I'm gonna stop talking. Let's go take a look. So here we have the AWS Cloud Hierarchy Structure. The way I want you to look at this is from the top to the bottom. The lower you go down, the less amount of access you have. We're gonna start with the top. Number one, organization root. The reason why this is so important is because it's the single top level identity for your entire business in AWS. I mean, it's the ultimate gatekeeper. And on top of that, securing this is the first and the most critical job. You have to secure this because if somebody has access to this, they have access to everything. This is the final boss. One safe practice is that you don't want to log in inside the organization root and use this to the day-to-day basis. Just try to reduce access as much as possible. And also I want to bring up is the security policies. It sets max rules for branches below, meaning that if you set security policies for organization root up here, everything below, organizational unit, AWS account, they all gonna get it too. That's what I want you to take in consideration. Now, number two, so think of organization root as pretty much the big tree, right? And then you go down and then you branch off. And with the other branches, you have organizational unit. The way I want you to think of organizational unit in a real life is that they're pretty much groups. The way you can see that here is that you have the development, so you have the people that's coding, and then you have one that says production, and it could even be another organizational unit that says security, which would be me, like incident response or something like that. And then you would have AWS accounts under it. And one mental note here is that each of these accounts is a secure boundary. Pretty much organizational units are used to group accounts. Organizational units, they are the key for security policies, meaning that you take advantage of these organizational units and security policies because they tell other accounts exactly what they have access to and what they do not have access to. Because the good thing is, if you make security policies here, it'd be different from security policies over here because they're two different groups. And this allows you to differentiate between who has what to whatever actions. Somebody in production should have access to what's going on in development. This is why there's different things in place to keep that in mind. And I'll do another video breaking down what a policy is and etc. And then down here, you got the AWS accounts. As you can see, this Project X. For production, you got the web servers, databases, because this is responsible for when applications do go into production, you can use this AWS account to represent that, and web servers. And for me, if it's somebody like I have a security organizational unit, and it could be pretty much the SOC analyst and etc. Okay, and the last one, we're gonna go with the least, the AWS accounts, the least privileged out of all of them. That's why they're at the bottom over here. It's security boundary by each AWS account, meaning that even though they're in the same organizational unit, doesn't mean that they have the same exact amount of access. Each account is a secure, isolated unit, acting like its own isolated network segment. Also, AWS has a thing called management account, and this is really important, which is the billing and the admin hub. And also you have member accounts. Let me tell you the difference. Look at these right here, these codes. Let's say that you had these two, right? Management account, this is really important because this is where pretty much the bills come from, how you pay your monthly AWS bill. The reason why this is important is because you want to know and keep tabs, and you can use, I believe AWS has a cost explorer to show you how much you're projected to actually spend on. And another thing you have to realize is that AWS, a lot of organizations, some organizations, they used to have more than one organizational root. So meaning they'll have multiple trees, right? But what AWS did was that they give you a bulk discount. Let's say you have multiple trees and you're able to compile it into one, meaning that, okay, I got organizational units over here, organization units over here, and then I'm gonna add some more AWS accounts. And then you bring it down, and that allows you to get a bulk discount because you have everything under one organizational root, and that makes it much more cheaper in your pockets, especially for organizations. One more thing I would like to bring up is that, let me bring up too, AWS also has a thing called cross-account access, meaning that let's use Project X for example. They can take the access they have here in Project X, and let's say because he's development and he needs to put certain things in production, he can have, if you configure it right, inside his AWS account, he can have also read access to the databases, meaning that he can see exactly what's inside the database if they configure it properly. That's one good thing about cross-account access, is definitely a convenience. Instead of manually having to add policies for each organizational unit, you could just cross it. Remember when I said AWS has a thing called IAM, Identity Access Management? Well, Azure kind of has something similar. It was called Azure Active Directory. Now they changed it to Entra ID. One of the common things you'll see inside Microsoft is that they change names a lot. So get used to it and always stay up to date. What makes Microsoft different is that they focus on centralized identity and billing subscription management. Let's go ahead and take a look at the hierarchy. Here we are with the Azure cloud hierarchy. The way I want you to look at this is pretty much look at it in the sense of, you have, the further you go up, the less amount of access you have. The further down, much more powerful, more access. First, we already talked about the foundation of Entra ID. This is pretty much granting users access and etc. And then we have the top container management groups. And the reason why this is important is because these are very high level containers and they sit above subscriptions, but they allow you to group subscriptions by the function of what it does, the location, aka geography, where it's located, and also the business unit. From a security standpoint, management groups, they're pretty much where you apply Azure policy and role-based access control across hundreds of subscriptions at the same time. Azure has something called role-based access control. What that is that you can grant a user application called a principal. Azure calls them security principals. You grant them roles based on what you need. So for example, I need an administrator. Okay, that's granting somebody a role. Billing admin, that's granting somebody a role. Developer, that's giving somebody a role. These are examples of roles. They can be predefined, they can be custom, or they can be basic. Now moving on to number 2, we got the billing unit, aka subscriptions. And this is the location for billing and access control. And this is the primary port where you got your resources, meaning your virtual machines and your databases. This is where they're created. And then up here, this is the less access out of all of them, which is the resource groups. And all they are is just logical containers for grouping related resources, meaning virtual machines, your disk, your network interfaces. And you can do that within a single subscription for easy management and deployment. That's why you see in this symbol here, you have virtual machines and everything. You can title them the way you want to, but you can put them all under a resource group. Now we on to the last cloud, which is GCP, aka Google Cloud Platform. They have their cloud hierarchy. They call it Identity Access Management, just like AWS as well. But it is slightly different, I will say. But this allows you to limit your access to resources and what users can access what and etc. Another thing about IAM inside GCP is that they practice the principle of least privilege, meaning the way their hierarchy is set up is to give the user least amount of access that they need to. Give them the least amount of access only to do their job. Nothing more, nothing less. Just right. All right, let's go ahead and look at the hierarchy structure. Here you're looking at the Google Cloud hierarchy. I know it's a little messed up with words, but I'm sorry. AI just kept butchering the words, okay? I did it multiple times and they just kept acting up. Here at the top, we have the organization node, and this is the top level. This is the king. GCP used to have something called G Suite, which is equivalent to Microsoft 365, but they rebranded it and now they call it Google Workspace. This is where ownership and global policies begin. And then it branches down into folders. And here you have compliance, you have sandbox. That's what it meant to say. See, it's a little errors. But folders, what I want to make in a relationship is that folders from GCP are equivalent to organizational units inside AWS or management groups inside Azure. They're used to group related projects. So if If you got the sandbox, you got compliance here. That's pretty much what they use for. They just have different titles to them. And also with the folders, from a security standpoint, folders, they enable the hierarchy firewall policies and consistent IAM policies to be applied across all child projects. Meaning right here, if you make policies up here, it all trickle down and each policy will have follow the same thing as well. You can also make them inside the folders as well for each group, but start from the top and then you work your way from the bottom. Now moving along, we have the actual project part. This is the work unit. This is the most cool part when it comes to security and building boundary inside GCP. This means for the virtual machines, for Kubernetes clusters and your databases, and everything lives inside a project, okay? And within projects, every time you build a project, it has an assigned project ID, and you have to secure that because you don't want the wrong person getting access to it. Unlike AWS accounts, GCP projects, they share the same fundamental identity like Azure. And I mean, for Entra ID is equivalent to, I'm sorry, I said 365 earlier. I meant to say Entra ID is similar to Google Workspace, but they provide an isolation boundary for the resources. Are you looking at all three clouds and you thinking to yourself, what is the hardest cloud to investigate? Well, from experience, I can tell you this. AWS requires switching accounts, like cross-account roles, in order for you to investigate lateral movements. Azure requires you to mastering Entra ID logs for identity compromise investigations. Investigation is highly contained within the compromise project boundary. Final verdict: AWS is best for isolated security because they have hard account boundaries. Azure is best for centralized identity management if you already use Microsoft tools. GCP is best used for applying strict top-down governance using folders and projects. Which hierarchy do you think is the most secure? Let me know in the comments. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let me know what you think. It's your boy Hold It Down Jay, former Air Force veteran, now transitioned to senior SOC analyst. I'ma holla at y'all. Peace.